Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Loving obeisances unto the Supreme Being Vasudeva. Janmadyasya yato anvayaditartascha artheshu abhigyaswarat. Tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsuraya. Tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha. Dhamna svena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi. We meditate upon the transcendent absolute being from whom springs forth this universe. He is present in all that exists and yet distinct from everything. He is fully conscious and totally independent. He revealed to the first seer Brahma the import of Vedic wisdom. The material creation, made of threefold gunas, appears in him as though real, like water in a mirage. Being eternally self effulgent, he is ever free of the illusion Maya of the material world. We meditate upon him, the Supreme Being. Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukad amritadrava sanyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. O devotees who relish a taste for divine love, Bhagavatam is the fully ripened fruit of the wish-yielding tree of Vedas, flowing as immortal nectar from Shuka Brahmam. Go on drinking this nectar day after day. So now we are entering the 19th chapter of the first Skandha, which is also the last chapter of this Skandha. So today we are completing the first Skandha or the first book of Srimad Bhagavatam. As we have noted, Bhagavatam has 12 skandhas or 12 books, or also called 12 cantos, because it's a poem. It's a large poem of 18,000 verses, and each section of the poem is a canto, a skandha. And the first skandha is entirely devoted to the story of how Parikshit comes to receive Bhagavatam from Shuka Brahma Rishi, which will be the dialogue unfolding from 2nd till the 12th skandhas. So the entire first skandha is first the story of how Vyasa composed Bhagavatam and revealed it to Shuka Brahma Rishi, and then how Parikshit became the king and then eventually took the vow to fast unto death and went to Ganga. And now in this last chapter, we see the sacred meeting of Parikshit and Shuka Brahma Rishi. This is the first time they're going to meet, and the holy dialogue over the remaining 11 skandhas will unfold after this meeting that happens in this chapter, which is a very blessed episode. So, as we saw, Parikshit was cursed by this young Brahmana boy Shringi, son of the sage Shamika, because of getting angry at what he perceived as a great insult to his father, while his father himself was not at all happy with the son's curse, knowing well that the uh, son is wrong to give a curse to a king who is very righteous and who probably just had a momentary lapse of reason. But the sage knew well, and so did the king, that it's all by the will of the Supreme Being, and therefore it was accepted calmly. So now we begin the last chapter, 19th chapter, and Parikshit is greatly repentant. First of all, he repents for that momentary lapse in his behavior towards the great sage. He knows that the great sage was spotless and he had no mistake. He did not ignore the king or anything of that nature. He was just deeply in meditation, and for some reason, he was put in a situation, Parikshit, where he got angry and disrespected the sage, even though he knows that it is all by the will of the Supreme Being, and also it's very uncharacteristic of him. He repents and tells himself and others that I ought not to have behaved like that. It is a great disrespect, and therefore, whatever punishment is meted out is quite appropriate for me, and I deserve to be completely consumed by the fire of any punishment for having angered a Brahmana boy and having disrespected a great sage, because the greatest offense is to commit an offense against a sage who is completely peaceful and only interested in God realization. So the main thing to recognize here is that the whole purpose of human life in the Vedic system, and which is how world ought to function, is to move humans toward self-realization or God realization, and thereby living in peace and doing their work, whatever duties there may be, according to their position and their stage in life and so on, while completely recognizing their true nature as divine and therefore living in peace and love. So, this is the highest purpose of human life, and the sages who are actualizing it, even if they are living away from society, even if they are living in a cave or in an ashram in a forest, as this sage Shamika did, they are creating the frequency or the vibration of the highest order, which benefits the whole society. So their actionless silence benefits the society more than the actions of egoic men, even if they are well intended, because actions coming out of the ego, even with good intentions, result in a lot of problems. As they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So many ideologies and many systems of thought with good intentions go astray because they are coming from partial views. They are coming from the ego, fragmented perspectives. And the sage who is in holistic realization, even if he is silent and not outwardly doing any action, he is benefiting the society more than the fragmented actions of egoic men. So, this is the reason why Parikshit very well knows that it was a great offense, even more than any offense against other types of men or other types of situations. This particular offense is the highest offense, to disrespect a sage. And Parikshit knew well that this is completely uncharacteristic of him, and especially coming from the lineage of Pandavas. So he was quite repentant, but also smiling at the supreme will of the supreme being that made him do this particular act in that particular moment, and accepting it, and thereby ready to accept the punishment. And so when he learned of the curse, that he is going to die in 7 days by the snake Takshaka, he took it as a great blessing. He felt that this is the greatest blessing because it is going to remove all his attachment to whatever possessions that he has. And he, of course, has a lot of possessions, being a king. Even though he is a great devotee and a man of very noble qualities, still being surrounded by possessions and position and power has its own effect. So when it's taken away by this kind of a notice, where it is told to him that in 7 days he is going to face death, that immediacy removes all attachment once and for all. So that's why it's the great blessing. In fact, this is why many calamities, as we saw in Kunti's prayer too, calamities are the greatest blessing because they seem like the greatest challenges, but they take away attachment to possessions which we would otherwise not let go of voluntarily. So, by taking them away, by completely changing the perspective of life. And the greatest and the most powerful way is to come in direct contact with mortality. In this case, Parikshit comes to know that he's going to die in 7 days, and that takes away all attachment and gives great vairagya. And therefore, Parikshit, he is not interested in anything now, in any earthly pleasure or even heaven. The only thing he is interested in is the lotus feet of Krishna, who is his dear, always in his heart. So he immediately takes a vow that he is going to fast to death on the banks of Ganga, contemplating exclusively on the lotus feet of Sri Hari and on God realization. So he installs his son Janamejaya, who's also a very nice person, a noble person, and he is installed as the king. And Parikshit renounces everything in the great tradition of what his grandfather Yudhishthira and brothers did as well. But in his case, with this immediacy that there is only 7 days, he goes to the Ganga and he reaches the banks of Ganga, which is near present day Haridwar, it is said. And there, it's a very holy place because that's where the holy Ganga meets the plains. She comes down the mountains from Gangotri and flowing all the way down, and the first place where she enters the plains is Haridwar, which is still a very sacred spot, and it's always been. And that's the spot where Parikshit goes, and he sits down there. And Ganga, which is coming from the feet of Hari, as we saw, and carrying tulasi leaves, and is the greatest resort for any dying man. Even today, many people go to the banks of Ganga, either in Haridwar or in Kashi, because Ganga purifies, and it gives a great refuge for anyone who is filled with dispassion and only interested in God realization. So it is said that it is carrying the feet of Mukunda. Mukunda is a name we have seen many times. The one who gives mukti, or the one who gives liberation, is a name for Krishna, Mukunda. So Mukunda Pada, or the feet of Mukunda, is what Ganga is, or which is to say that Ganga carries the very feet of liberation itself, or the very essence of liberation itself. And therefore, it is a sacred river where Parikshit retires to, and he decides to completely fast to death. So he had, this is the great quality of Parikshit. So he did one small mistake, which turned out to be a blessing actually, as he realizes it, because that made him renounce his kingdom, renounce all attachment, and give undivided devotion to Krishna. And he decides to also fast to death on the banks of Ganga with great dispassion. And he takes the garb of a hermit. He removes all the royal attire. He wears a very simple clothes of a hermit, and he sits there in completely undivided devotion, silently. And when he does that, it is like they say the flowers cannot, the truly fragrant flower cannot be hidden from the honeybees. So similarly, because of his fragrant presence and his undivided devotion, though he sits there in solitude, immediately great sages along with their pupils start assembling there. And we see that all these great sages, who are themselves holy in their own way, and they are sacred places themselves, and they make sacred places sacred. As we saw, even when we were talking about Vidura, the verse said that Vidura, though he visited sacred places, he made them sacred. It said tirti kurvanti tirtani. So tirtha, the holy place, is made into tirtha. A holy place is made into a holy place by the feet of the sacred holy men and women. So these are such sages who make holy places holy. and a list of these holy sages is given, a great list of people, great rishis such as Atri, Chavana, Arishtanemi, Bhrigu, Vishwamitra, Devala, Bharadwaja, Gautama, Agastya, and of course Vedavyasa himself, and Narada, Devarishi Narada, who always comes to all such great congregations. So every rishi mentioned here, and there is many more, each one is great in their own way. Atri is a great rishi who is known to have composed wonderful works of in various fields. Chavana is known for his work on medicine. That's why Chavan Parash is still famous today as an elixir for health and so on. Parashara comes there, who has composed the Parashara Hora Shastra, which is the great work on astrology. Vishwamitra, of course, is known to have authored the Gayatri Mantra itself. Gautama, Agastya comes there, who is known to be the sage from whom the language Tamil came about, which is a very ancient language. And Vyasa himself is there, and Narada is there. So, all these are great beings. And one thing we see here is all these rishis of the Vedic times, they came up with this Vedic civilization which had all aspects handled. So, they were fully realized, but they were also exploring various sciences in the outer dimension as well, whether it's health or archery or astrology or astronomy or various other sciences. And there are these works are still available, and they're still so precise. Grammar, language, poetry, so many fields were explored by them. Surgery, so many things. So the important thing to recognize here is a civilization can be holistic. Today, for example, the modern scientific civilization does have great advancements in the outer realm, but not paired with inner realization and wisdom, and therefore it's asymmetric and skewed. So, but the answer to that is not necessary to give up the outer advancement. So that's what is demonstrated by these rishis, that you can have both. If one is rooted in the self realization and in the highest purpose and acts out of there, not out of greed or not out of just grabbing power, but using knowledge as a true means of expanding the welfare of all beings, then outer advancements can also happen in a holistic way. So, disciplines such as yoga, Ayurveda, they all came about because of such holistic views of rishis, as opposed to, for instance, the medicines of today, which have so many side effects and so on. So, there is a great lesson there with all these rishis and how they evolved the Vedic civilization collectively. So, all these rishis have assembled now because they've all come, they all know that all these works aside, the highest purpose is devotion to the Supreme Being, and they know that this 7 days is going to be special. Though at this point, Parikshit doesn't even know that Shuka Brahma Rishi is going to come and Bhagavatam is going to be narrated to him. He simply went with a pure heart and sincere intent of realizing the Supreme Being in his heart and being in undivided devotion for 7 days. But all the rishis who are having the vision of time in all three dimensions, they sensed that this is going to be a special occasion, and therefore they all assemble there. And seeing them all come, Parikshit was, of course, very honored. He got up and he offered his obeisance, he bowed down, and then they were all very happy. They all took their seats, and then he expressed his intention. He said, "It's so great, first of all, a great blessing for a king like me to see all the rishis, because he says, generally, you all keep away from kings and from wealth and so on. So the other thing is, all these rishis, they normally live away from cities and live away from areas of hustle and bustle, and they work in quietude, either silently or if they are even producing works. It's all happening in places away from population centers. So, whereas the king is caught in the middle of the population center, so that's why Parikshit says it's a great blessing for me to even see all of you. And as you may know, I've been cursed, but I see this curse as a boon because it has given me complete aversion toward all worldly pleasures. I'm filled with dispassion, detachment, and only interest in serving and remembering and abiding in the Supreme Being. And now it's made even more special because all you sages have come. So this has been a truly a blessing. So all the rishis, along with Ganga Ma, Mother Ganga, where he is sitting by, he says, "Please bless me as a devotee of Vishnu, of Krishna." And he says, "Let the snake bite me, let Takshaka bite me anytime. Now I'm ready for it. I just want to listen to stories of the Lord till the last moment." So he is so filled with devotion now, and he is so happy. Already he is sitting by the Ganga, he's in a sacred place, he is free of all attachment to all power, position, everything. And on top of it, all these rishis have come. And so he says, "Please tell me what I need to know." And I'm only filled with devotion to Ananta, and all I know is one thing, the devotion to. So he uses the name of Krishna as Ananta here. Again, it's a beautiful name which means unlimited or infinite. So all I know is that devotion to Ananta, Satsanga, that is association of holy sages, and friendship towards all beings. This is the only purpose of life. So that's so beautifully summarized by Parikshit. Three things: devotion to Supreme Being, Ananta, the infinite being, Satsanga, or association with holy sages. So, not associating with worldly men closely, but remain always in association with sages and with devotees, but at the same time having friendship for all, whether people are of the world or people are even as this boy, for example, who cursed him, or people even doing other evil acts, have no hatred toward any of them and friendship for all. These are the three things he says. And may I be blessed with this even if I take another birth. This is the prayer of Parikshit. So, with this prayer, Parikshit sits down again in his seat. He addresses all these rishis with great humility that this is my prayer and this is the intent with which I am sitting down here. And I only want to listen to the stories of the Lord and abide in devotion and in association with you, great sages, and with friendship for all beings. And already Janamejaya has been installed the son, installed as the king, the son of Parikshit. So Parikshit is now on the southern bank of the Ganga, sitting on grass, kusha grass, which is a special kind of grass suitable for sitting in sacred havans or performances and so on. And he's facing north, which is a very sacred direction to face. So he is doing everything correctly, in the right place, in the right direction, with the right company, and all the heavens, as it were, are raining showers on him. It's like flowers. There is shower. In many cases, it is said that when a very sacred event happens, there is rain and it showers as if flowers are raining down from the skies, and there is thunder like drums are being beaten to celebrate the event. So, this is what happens. And all the rishis, they are all in great appreciation of Parikshit. They applaud him and they say to him that it is no wonder that you are doing this, O Parikshit, because you are, after all, from the lineage of Pandavas. Your grandfathers were completely surrendered to Krishna and directly associated with him. So it is no wonder that you are also able to walk away and very gracefully accept your death. and be as a complete Krishna Bhakta, willing to spend your last days in exclusive devotion to Krishna. It's called as Ananya Bhakti, that is with no other thought except devotion to Krishna. And you're not clinging to power and looking for any remedy to this curse and all that, but simply accepting it gracefully and realizing the higher purpose of living, and therefore walking away and willing to spend the 7 days in God realization. So there is again a lesson for, and we've seen this lesson over and over already with Yudhishthira, and now with even before that with Dhritarashtra, and now with Parikshit, and it will come again and again later too, that it is right for anyone in power especially to walk away voluntarily after some time of serving, instead of clinging to power till the last moment and then trying to put their successors, their dynasty in and all the rest. Just find the suitable person who can take over so that it is carried on in a responsible way, and then move away and live in a peaceful place focused on God realization. So they say, these rishis say, therefore, that now that you have taken this holy vow, we are very honored to be here actually, and we are going to remain here for the next 7 days to be with you and to see you ascend to the eternal abode. So they know that it is a very wonderful time, a very auspicious time, because these 7 days, they know actually it's going to be the greatest dialogue. And after that, they are going to see the deliverance of Parikshit. In fact, they call him Bhagavata Pradhana, which means he is a principal Bhagavata. He is an epitome of a true Bhagavata or a true devotee. And therefore, they say it's a blessing to see his departure. And Parikshit, on hearing the sweet words of the sages, is very happy, and he is also very eager to listen about Hari from these sages. So he tells them, he addresses them very sweetly. He says, "You are all Vedas personified itself, and you have no other purpose to move about except to distribute your love and compassion. You have no personal ends or motives to be achieved. You are simply there for awakening love in the hearts of people and spreading your love and compassion. And therefore, I have only two questions for you as I am sitting here for the next 7 days. The first question is, what's the duty of men while living in all circumstances? And the second is, especially, what's the duty of one who is about to die? So, this is the question he addresses to the rishis. Again, the two questions are, what are the duties of men in all circumstances while living? And second is, what are the duties when about to die? It seems like two questions, but in reality, if you look at it carefully, it's the second question that matters more, because the truth is everyone is about to die. In fact, Parikshit got a 7 day notice. Most people don't even get 1 day notice. It happens without knowing instantly for so many, and therefore nobody knows what the last day is. And therefore, Parikshit is actually having more days to 7 days of notice, which is very rare. So, the real serious question is to recognize that death is coming any moment, and therefore, what is the duty to be done for one who is about to die? But the first question is, while that's going on, while one is living and engaged in all kinds of duties, what is the duty during that time as well? So, when this question is asked by Parikshit to the rishis, and he expects the rishis to answer, because these are all great personalities. Vyasa himself has come, Narada has come, and we saw the other list of great rishis. But then nobody answers, because right as this question is asked, walks in the great young sage Shuka Brahma Rishi. So he is the real hero, we can say, of Bhagavatam, because he is the greatest Bhagavata, and he is the one who's going to narrate the entire Bhagavatam, and the entire first skandha is coming up to this moment. We have arrived at this moment, a sacred moment, where Shuka Brahma Rishi finally makes his appearance. And he is described so beautifully by Bhagavatam here. Suta Maharishi describes him. He says, this Shuka Brahma Rishi, as he arrives, he is glowing. He is literally like the Supreme Being. He calls him Bhagavan. He is always moving about freely. He is always in his bliss. He is Avadhuta. And people, even kids and so many other normal folk, are all coming around him because they are all attracted to him. They don't know who this personality is because he doesn't have any mark on him. It doesn't show whether he is a sannyasi or a householder. That is he a renunciate or is he a householder? It doesn't show whether he is a warrior or a scholar like Kshatriya, Brahmana. So he has no marks of any kind that give away what he is. He is beyond all classes. It is called as Ati Varnashrami. So he is neither in any Varna nor in any ashrama, and he is fully reveling in his own bliss, radiant, and people are attracted to him, kids are attracted to him, animals are attracted to him without even knowing why. And that's how Shuka Brahma Rishi walks there, entering this congregation. The verse is very beautiful verse. The first verse that introduces Shuka Brahma Rishi coming there. Tatra bhavat bhagavan vyasaputro yadrichaya gamatамано anapeksha alakshyalingo nijalabhatushto pritascha balair avadhuta veshaha. This is the verse. Tatra abhavat bhagavan. There comes the great Bhagavan, Supreme Being, Vyasaputro, son of Vyasa, Yadrichaya, who moves about as ordained without any personal will, Anapekshaha, without any expectation, Alakshyalingo, he has no marks of any kind, and he is surrounded by, as we said, Balai, children and women and world people of the world and animals and all the rest, and he is dressed as an Avadhuta Veshaha. That means he is not having any uh, clothing of any kind. He is, it's also referred as Digambara, which means he, for him, all the directions and sky itself is his dress, because he's got no body consciousness. And we already saw this in the in a verse in the beginning, where it is said that when he walked naked, even young women who were bathing did not take notice of him, because they could sense that he has no gender identification, and therefore they did not feel shy or anything of that nature. He was completely oblivious to his physical identification of any kind. So that's how it's described here. Such a beautiful verse. And then it goes on to describe how Shuka Brahma Rishi looks. He's 16 years of age. Dvai Ashtavarsham, it says, 2 into 8, that is 16 years old. Very tender body, lotus like eyes, tender feet. So he's very young. So we can see how the wisdom of the self has got nothing to do with age, and all the rishis there immediately get up. Everyone, the whole congregation, sees this great being arrive. Parikshit is there, and he is full of respect for all the sages, and all the sages are assembled there. But everyone, and Parikshit himself, of course, rise from their seat as soon as this great being enters this congregation, because he is so radiant, resplendent. He is simply a 16-year-old young man, and his body and his eyes and his feet are all tender, and he is very beautiful looking. He has got a broad chest, and he is very attractive. He is dark in complexion like Krishna, It says Shyamam. So he is like Shyama means darkish in complexion, just as Krishna is also dark in complexion. And so his whole presence is so attractive that everybody rise up. And Parikshit, who's also called Vishnu Rata, he bows down immediately. He puts his head on the ground and he bows down with great humility, seeing the greatness of this sage he's meeting for the first time. And all the rishis are all surrounding this Shuka Brahma rishi. Bhagavatam says, like stars are surrounding the moon. So on a full moon night, the moon shines and so many stars are around. That's how all these sages, each one of them being so great, are like stars next to the full moon, which is the sage Shuka. So then the sage is given an exalted seat, and the king bows down, and then he is so pleased to see the presence, and all these children and various other people who were coming with the sage, they all go away. They realize, because when he was walking through the town or through that area before he reached the banks of Ganga, they were all attracted to this great sage, but they didn't know of his real greatness because he didn't have any marks. He was simply a naked Avadhuta, and therefore they thought he is some attractive being who's they were unaware. They don't know why they were even attracted, but they were all attracted because of his radiance. But now they see that the king is rising up, and all the sages, the great rishis, are all rising up. So they are all now realizing his greatness, and they also bow down and go away. And then the sages sit down, and then the king addresses in very sweet tones. He says, I am so blessed to have you as my guest here, as my Atithi. And he says, any house is said to be instantly purified by even remembering a sage. What to speak of being seeing him, and even more by touching him or by having his feet touch the holy ground. So this is so rare, but you have come here on your own. And he says, you don't even, Parikshit is aware of his reputation. He says, you don't even stay in one place too long. So but you have come here, and I'm so fortunate that you have come here at this time. Your very presence will wipe out all sins, just as all demons are wiped out by Krishna. And he says finally that this is, as always, Parikshit being a very humble being, he knows that this is only due to grace that such a being can visit him. So he thanks Krishna immediately, and he says, it is only because Krishna is pleased toward my forefathers. So he doesn't even take any credit. He says Pandavas, who are the favorite of Krishna because they are his grandfathers, he says, because Krishna is pleased toward the Pandavas and therefore he is pleased towards me, he has blessed me with this great honor and this tremendous grace. Because what can be asked for more by a dying man than seeing a great sage like you? So he is so moved to tears, Parikshit, and he glorifies from his heart the sage who has come there, the great Shuka, and he is glorifying Krishna for sending him. Is as it's always said, when the seeker or when the devotee is ready, the right guru comes. It is all a matter of true, sincere Shraddha or earnestness. And when the earnestness is there, the Lord sends the right teacher. So he is a very earnest, dispassionate, noble king, and therefore he is rewarded with the highest teacher by Krishna. Now he places the same question in front of Shuka Brahma Rishi. The question he put to the rishis. Now he realizes that none of the rishis are going to answer him because they've all risen up and they're all offering their obeisances to this young sage. So he addresses the question to the sage now, and he says, I want to know in these 7 days what is the highest means of realization and what are the duties. Again, the two questions. What are the duties of men under all circumstances in general? and what are the duties when approaching death in particular, and what is the right thing to hear, repeat, remember, and what is it to avoid. This is the question beautifully Parikshit places. What should one hear, repeat, remember, hold on to, and what should one avoid, and what is the duty of one in all circumstances, and especially as death approaches. So, hearing this question, Shuka Brahma Rishi, who is seated and who is glowing like the sun, he looks at Parikshit and he starts answering. And the answer begins in the second skandha. So that's how the first skandha ends. Shuka Brahma Rishi has seated down and he has not uttered a word yet. So, again, beautifully, Bhagavatam leaves us asking for more. Just at the time when Shuka Brahma Rishi is about to open his mouth, the first skandha ends and the second skandha begins with the most holy discourse of Shuka Brahma Rishi that then spans the 11 skandhas to go forward. So, with this, we have completed the first skandha today, which has brought us literally in our mind's eye to the banks of Ganga in a holy place at a holy time thousands of years ago, and we can see the great congregation with the enlightened, radiant being Shuka sitting in the middle and starting his wonderful discourse now. So we will now enter the second skandha tomorrow and listen to Shuka Brahma Rishi from tomorrow and the nectar that flows from him, as the first introductory verse says. Shukamukad Amrita Drava Sanyutam. From the mouth of Shuka, the nectar that flows is Bhagavatam, and that's what we will listen to from tomorrow. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.